Hello and welcome to the final Welsh debate election season. In just 2 days' time, the polling stations in Wales will open and you can choose who you want to be your representative in the Senedd. Tonight, we're joined by the leaders of three of Wales's three biggest parties. And while I'm not going to make any predictions about how Thursday's election will go, I'm pretty confident in telling you that one of the three people on this call with me is going to be Wales's First Minister after the election has finished. So if I introduce them all first, we've got Wales's current First Minister and Labour leader, Mark Drakeford, Conservative Group Leader, Andrew Davies, and Plaid Cymru's leader, Adam Price. Hi to all of you, and thank you for joining us tonight, just a few days before the end of the campaign. For everyone watching, the format tonight is fairly simple. We've got eight questions that have all been submitted by readers, and we'll put them to each candidate in turn. For delays, I'm going to go over to our first question, which is from Jonathan from Barry.
My name is Jonathan Glossop in Barry, and one of my questions is, have we come out of lockdown too soon? And if we have, and we do have to go into another lockdown, how will we cope and how will businesses cope with that in the future?
So we can go to Andrew Davies on that one first.
Well, we're able to come out of lockdown because of the success of the UK vaccination programme. And I think that shows when the UK works as one, it works so well together. And coming out with businesses and society as a whole opening up, gradually being led by the science and the data is the correct approach. We've got to make sure that we get the right business support in place, because some businesses obviously are still stuck and not able to reopen till later. May the 17th is a key date and June the 21st is another key date for our roadmap. So that's why we would have made sure that business support was available before we went into this election period, so people had certainty. And if we were fortunate to win the election on May the 6th, we would make sure that that business support was backdated. But what's really important is that we stick to the data, stick to the science, and continue to reopen, building on the success of the vaccination programme.
Thank you, Andrew. Next, and Mark Drakeford, please, from Welsh Labour.
Well, we've come out of lockdown in line with the advice that we have from our Chief Medical Officer and Chief Scientist, as we have throughout the pandemic. So I don't think it's too soon. I think the figures in Wales are very good, with the lowest levels of coronavirus anywhere in the United Kingdom and the highest levels of vaccination. I think that we are able to cope now in future with resurgences of the vaccine, of the virus, provided we don't see the re-importation of the virus from other parts of the world by opening up foreign travel too quickly. That is my single greatest anxiety, and I urge the Prime Minister, as I always do, to be as cautious as he needs to be in not allowing a position where the virus can come back into Wales from elsewhere with new variants as well as new volumes of the virus.
Mark Drakeford, thank you very much. And Adam Price.
I think that we are in a fortunate position at the moment with very, very low case levels now in Wales, indeed relative to the rest of the UK, and that's allowed us to bring forward some of those easing of restrictions. We do, though, absolutely need to be vigilant, and particularly in relation to what Mark as just referred to, in terms of variants of concern, and particular the possibility that one of them could become a so-called escape variant, which is immune to protection provided by the vaccine. So let's be guided always by the science and the medical advice, and let's make steady progress in easing restrictions rather than moving too quickly and then having, sadly, to be in a position of where we would need to be reversing. We need to avoid a further lockdown at all costs.
Adam, thank you very much. Mark Drakeford, can I ask you, your manifesto isn't full of big promises like the other two parties on here. So there's no big new hospitals like the Conservatives are planning, or £1.6 billion relief road. Plaid are talking about cutting council tax and decarbonising Wales. You've told me previously that's because the next 5 years are about recovery. So does that mean that you think the other parties are wrong for making such bold promises in the wake of COVID?
Look, I want to be clear. Our manifesto is a bold and ambitious manifesto. It has a new national forest, a new national park, a new national music service, the implementation of our new national curriculum, reform of the school day, a community bank on high streets across Wales, 21st century surgeries, bringing treatments into the community close to where people live. But the big difference between our manifesto and that of others is that ours is credible. If we say we will do something, we have the power and we have the money. We are not relying on the actions of others to deliver our manifesto. So it is ambitious. It sets Wales on a path for the future, but it does so in a way that we know if we say it, we can do it. And I don't believe that that is true of either of the other parties.
Andrew, do you want to come back on that first and then Adam?
Well, I disagree entirely with the accusation our manifesto isn't deliverable. It stood up to the test of scrutiny from outside organisations. It is bold, it is ambitious, because coming out of the COVID crisis, we do need a bold, ambitious vision that rectifies the 22 years of Labour failure that we've seen in the first 22 years of devolution. We can't just go on carrying on as we are with another 5 years of Labour at the helm. And the delivery of the M4 relief was a key manifesto commitment for the Labour Party back in 2016. They didn't deliver that. And halfway through this parliamentary term, they dropped that commitment. So what is in our manifesto will be delivered. It is our commitment, our manifesto commitment. The issue with Labour is that they've been proven not to deliver on their manifesto commitments.
Adam, is your manifesto credible, as the First Minister says it may not be?
Yeah, well, yes, and we know that because we've had two of Wales's leading economists confirm that it is credible. Their actual words. Now is the time for us to be ambitious. Give you two particular areas. We know that one of the things that we're going to having to deal with is many more people, sadly, with chronic conditions, long COVID. The important thing is we have to end the barrier between healthcare and social care. We've got to bring social care into the NHS family, providing it free at the point of need, and we've got to be paying those care worker wages at the same level as the NHS. We can't delay that any longer, and that's what. And unfortunately, the Labour government has said we've got to wait to see what Westminster does. We wait forever if you're going to think that progressive change is going to come from a Conservative Westminster government. The other one is child poverty. We've seen, haven't we, the link between poverty and inequality, and sadly, the very, very high death rate we've had as a result of the pandemic. So, for us, immediately extending, for example, free school meals to those 70,000 of children that are living in poverty, absolutely essential in terms of dealing with the problems of poverty and its effect on people's health outcomes in later life. But, how are those children that are already facing the difficulty of the last 12 months, how can they learn if they are hungry? Surely we can all agree, we should be able to agree tonight, that actually those 70,000 children currently living in poverty, who currently don't receive free school meals, why can't we all agree, Plaid Cymru would make that a priority for the next government? It should be a priority for all of the three parties standing for election tonight.
Thank you, Adam. I'm going to take you on to the next question if I can. This is from Ellis from Cardiff.
I'm Ellis and I'm from Cardiff, and my question is, what actions will your political party take to help children deal with mental health issues due to the pandemic?
Mark Drakeford, if you could answer that one first, please.
Well, Ellis, thank you. Whenever I talk to young people, as I have many times during this campaign, the issue of mental health is raised time after time. We've already invested additional sums of money, many millions of pounds, in strengthening mental health services during this pandemic. Mental health will be the single biggest budget in the NHS in the next Senedd term. What young people say to me is they want forms of help that prevent problems from getting worse in the future. They want their teachers to be well equipped. They want youth workers to be well equipped. They want adults in their lives who can give them the help with the challenging business of growing up, particularly during the pandemic. Our pledge for 1,800 new members of staff in schools to help young people deal with the consequences of the pandemic is just one of the ways in which we will attend to the mental health consequences of the pandemic in the lives of our young people.
Mark Drakeford from Labour, thank you very much. Plaid to Adam Price, please.
Yeah, but 1,800 is not going to be enough. That we need 4,500 extra staff, including specialist staff working on mental and emotional well-being with our young people. We need, and we will create as a government, a network of well-being centres, mental well-being centres, particularly focused on young people, walk-in centres for mental well-being in every community in Wales. We don't spend enough on mental health. It's 23% of our sickness, and yet it's only 11% of the budget. So we got to close that gap by increasing the share of the NHS budget going on mental health every year, and that's what a Plaid Cymru government will do.
Adam Price, thank you very much. Andrew Davies from the Conservatives.
I agree with the First Minister. It's one of the issues that gets raised time and time again with me from young people is mental health. That's why we have it as a cornerstone of our legislative programme, a new mental health bill, because unless you put it into legislation and give rights to people, you will find that the same outcomes happen that have been happening for the last 22 years. So we have that as a centrepiece of our legislative programme. We'd also invest with 5,000 more teachers in our schools over the next 5 years, as well as 24-hour walk-in centres. And importantly, talking therapies, the development of talking therapies, so that actually in the primary sector, so at those early stages, people can get that health and support in schools at a very early stage before the problems build and manifest themselves in greater issues further down the line. But it is important to have staff on the front line. That's our commitment to the education system with 5,000 more teachers. But as I say, it's about giving rights to young people to expect a level of support and help. And that's why it's a cornerstone of our legislative programme. And I think we're the only party with that as a part of their legislative programme.
Thank you, Andrew. On to question 3.
My name is Jonathan Morgan and I live in Aberdeen. And my question is about waiting lists in Wales. In England, there are 58 million people. 388,000 of them are waiting a year or more for NHS treatment. In Wales, we have 3 million people, but 218,000 of these are waiting 9 months or more for NHS treatment. What do the parties intend to do to address this imbalance in waiting lists?
So first to answer that one is Adam Price.
Absolutely critically important. And so we would invest in diagnostic centres, very, very important in areas like cancer. They've actually proven the ones that have been piloted in Wales. So we need to roll them out in every community. We've got to go to the heart of the problem, which was there before the pandemic in terms of the level of waiting times, which is the underinvestment in the NHS workforce. We've got gaps in NHS workforce, which of course adds to the stress and the burnout felt by the existing workforce, but it also is reflected in the waiting time. So we've got to have a clear target for an extra 6,000 staff in the NHS workforce. That's 1,000 doctors, 4,000 nurses, and 1,000 other allied staff, so that through that extra investment, we can ensure that we can get those waiting times down and actually ensure a better health outcomes in the future as well.
Adam Price, thank you very much. Andrew Davies, please.
Thank you, Jonathan, for the question. It is right to say 1 in 5 people regrettably on a waiting list here in Wales. That's why investing in the staff and retention of staff is so important. That's why we're committed to introducing into law an NHS covenant that offers that help and support to retain staff and put 1,200 more doctors, 3,000 more nurses on the front line, making sure that we get elective surgery back up and running as quickly as possible within our district general hospitals, but importantly, investing in our community hospitals with new community hospitals across Wales, 5 in total, so that we can take the pressure out of the district general hospitals and move people into the community for treatment, because more community services means that we can speed up minor procedures, working with optometrists, for example, when it comes to eye services, and so making sure that investment in the NHS is safeguarded by our NHS covenant, and that investment in the staff and delivering those new hospitals and delivering community services at the primary level will help speed up the lowering the waiting list that regrettably see 1 in 5 people on a waiting list here in Wales. The highest waiting list, I would say, anywhere in the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Andrew. And finally, Mark Drakeford.
Well, just one fact to put into the discussion. In the month before the pandemic hit, waiting times in Wales were the lowest they'd been for 5 years, and they'd fallen in every year of this Senedd term. Now, it's true, of course, that the pandemic has made waiting lists longer and waiting times longer in every part of the United Kingdom. Wales is certainly not unique in that. What do we need? We need more investment. My party will invest £1 billion as a down payment in the recovery of the NHS here in Wales. We will need extra staff. The staff in the NHS are exhausted by the experience of helping us through the pandemic. That's why we propose a new medical school based in North Wales to train the workers we will need for the future. And then we will need creativity. We will need to capture the good things that have happened during the pandemic, the speed with which the NHS has changed, the way in which it provides services for people. All of that will be necessary to put our NHS back on track, to make sure that it can do all the other things we look for it to do, alongside continuing to deal with coronavirus, which has not gone away and which the health service in Wales deals with every day.
Thank you, Mark Drakeford. Can I just ask, your party has been in power since 1999 in Wales. Firstly, can you say that you're proud of your record on health? Or is it, as Adam Price just said, that part of the problem is that there's a legacy of underinvestment which has caused problems in the first place?
I'm very proud of the record here in Wales. When devolution began, there were under 60,000 people employed in the NHS. In Wales today, it's over 80,000.
Did you hear me there?
I can hear you. You are coming and going. Can you hear me?
Fine. Sorry, as long as you heard the question.
I just about heard the question. And I was saying that I am proud of our record in Wales. Adam talked about underinvestment in staff. The number of staff in the NHS has grown by over 20,000 people during the time of devolution under Labour governments. It's grown by 11% in the last Senate term alone, while our budgets have been under the pressure of adversity and austerity. We've invested in our hospitals, we've invested in our staff. Our new treatment fund means that people get new drugs in Wales within 13 days of them being approved, rather than nearly 100 days before we introduced the fund. Our cancer waiting times are improving, and cancer survival rates have improved at 1 year and 5 years in Wales. It's very easy to run the NHS in Wales down. It does it no favours, and it doesn't tell the truth either.
Can I directly challenge you on what you said a moment ago, that waiting times were improving before the pandemic? Because the numbers waiting in Wales over 36 weeks in December 2019 were 25,549 patients. That compares to the figure a year previously of 12,982. That's an almost 100% increase in those waiting more than 36 weeks. How can you say the waiting times were going down?
Because you just choose to pick one figure out of the air. The waiting time target in Wales, pardon me, is not 36 weeks, but 26 weeks. And the number of people waiting 26 weeks, the target of the NHS in Wales, was going down. You can always pick a figure, Adam, in that sort of way, and try and pretend that it tells the whole story. It certainly doesn't, and you should know better.
Don't you think that it's just...
Can I just interrupt? Andrew, can I bring you in? Andrew, can I bring you in here? Is it because there's not enough funding coming from the UK government to support Wales's need in terms of the health service?
No, I disagree with that, because obviously in the early part of the 2010 to 2015, there was ring fencing of health spending on a UK basis, and Welsh Labour were the only party in the whole of the United Kingdom, whether you were a nationalist government in Scotland or a Conservative government in Westminster or the executive in Northern Ireland, that took a conscious decision, and Mark was part of that, to vote to cut health spending. But let's not look backwards. It'd be easy for me as an opposition politician to look backwards. Let's look forwards, because that's what the NHS in Wales needs, is a vision for where we want it to be over the next 5 years, because we know these chronic waiting times are there, and people on those waiting times are under huge emotional and personal pressure, as well as the staff within the NHS. They want to feel valued, and that's why it's important that things are put into law via our NHS Covenant that seeks to invest in our NHS each and every year of the next parliamentary term, make sure people know that their rights are protected, and importantly, staff within the NHS feel valued and don't turn their back and leave the NHS. And that's why, as well as recruiting recruiting staff, we would make sure the working conditions of staff within the NHS were flexible enough to retain that expertise that we need to retain to get on top of these waiting lists.
Well,
Thank you all for that question. Sorry, Adam, I am just going to move us on to another topic just because we've got an awful lot to get through.
Wanted to mention,
question 4, if we can.
I just wanted to mention nurses' pay, because that's absolutely central to valuing them, and we're committed to at least delivering the same real terms minimum pay increase that they've done in Scotland, and we want to do more because of the real terms cut there has been in NHS pay over 10 years.
Well,
okay.
that is
Thank
important, and that's why we're committed to implementing the independent pay reviews recommendation, because that's why it's important to follow the independent process that makes these recommendations, so that you have a sustainable pay package in place that rewards the work that our frontline workers do.
Thank you, Andrew. So on to question 4, if I can, please.
With Scotland on the brink of independence and there being a real possibility of a united Ireland, what are each of the parties' positions on Welsh independence?
Andrew R.T. Davies, can we go to you first, please?
I think Wales is a passionate, proud and dynamic country, and ultimately its place is best served within the United Kingdom, because Wales is strong within the United Kingdom is strong with Wales within it. And the next government that forms after May the 6th, the last thing it needs to do is have any energy diverted into constitutional chaos that an independence referendum ultimately would create. Its focus should be solely on the economic revival of Wales after what has been the most horrendous 12 months any man, woman or child can think of. And that's why I am firmly against an independence referendum, just like I'm firmly against an abolish referendum for the Welsh Parliament. No more constitutional carnage or change. Focus on the day job, get the economy working for everyone in Wales, get our public services back up and running, and ultimately improve the education prospects for children the length and breadth of Wales. That will be the focus of the Welsh Conservatives if we're given the mandate after May the 6th.
Andrew R.T. Davies, thank you very much. Labour's Mark Drakeford next, please.
Well, the choice in this election on this matter is as clear as it can be. For all of Andrew's talk, what we face is a Conservative government in Westminster hell-bent on taking money and powers away from Wales, undermining the devolution that was voted for in 2 different referendums here in Wales. And on the other side, you've got Adam's policy of independence, of ripping Wales out of the United Kingdom. My party believes in entrenched devolution. Strong devolution, a strong Wales, but in a successful United Kingdom. And if that is going to happen, the Tories are going to have to take their head out of the sand in the way we've heard tonight. Constitutional change is inevitable and necessary if we are to preserve the United Kingdom. I want to see that happen. Pretending that there isn't a problem certainly will only make things worse.
Shall I go next, seeing as I'm on home turf, as it were? At the heart of our politics is a very, very simple idea that Wales has huge potential as a country. We will make a success of independence. We have fantastic talent and creativity within our nation. The only solution to our problems is actually taking our future into our own hands. The solutions won't come from Westminster. Westminster is rotten to the core. That's what we want to rip Wales out of the clutches of the Conservative government at Westminster. And that's why even a majority of Labour supporters now are inspired by this positive message of an independent Wales, which will be a beacon of social justice and economic progress. That's the future for us. And more people are inspired by that hopeful vision of the Wales that we're going to create together as a nation.
Adam, can I come back to you on that? As you'd expect, it's a topic that gets our readers very motivated. But the biggest question most people have is, can Wales really afford to go independent? How do you answer that?
We turn the question on its head, because we would say, we cannot afford to stay within this unequal United Kingdom. The reason that Wales is underperforming economically is because we're in a very, very centralized UK, which actually centralizes political power, but also wealth and privilege in one corner of the United Kingdom. And we're never going to be able to break out of that within the confines of the UK political system. We, as an independent country, on the other hand, will be able to realize our potential, both collectively as a nation, but also everyone within Wales. So 1 in 3 of our children that are living in
Sorry,
poverty.
Adam, can you bring it back to money? As an economic factor, how can Wales afford it?
Well, look, we have fantastic economic possibilities as a nation. We're just being held back at the moment because we don't get the investment. Look at our infrastructure. We can't invest at the level that we are needed to create the economic success. And therefore, is it any surprise that we're underperforming at the moment? Because we even have a Westminster government that it imposes a cap on our ability to borrow to invest in the future of a country. As an independent country, we would be able to invest in the 2 most important determinants of economic success: the skills of our people and the infrastructure that our businesses have to perform at the best of their ability and to become competitive. You take away the impediments that Westminster imposes upon us, and you will see this nation excel and succeed like never before.
Andrew, I presume you would disagree quite strongly with those comments from Adam.
Well, disagree passionately. I don't disagree with his comments that Wales is a proud, passionate and dynamic country with the right leadership. But I do believe that ultimately we are served best by working within the Union of the United Kingdom, as we've seen with the pandemic. You know, the most successful example of the Union working as one is the vaccination programme. Being in there early, procuring those vaccination doses that our dedicated and wonderful NHS teams, along with army personnel and local government employees, have been distributing around Wales. That's allowing us to unlock the economy and unlock society as a whole. There's a glowing example of the strength of the Union working in the benefit of every citizen. And when you come to the financials, the numbers speak for themselves. You know, if Wales does want to go the poorer route, then it would go for independence. If it wants to enjoy the strengths of the Union and the benefits of the Union, it'll stick with the Union and actually fight its corner and make sure we get that investment. And I passionately believe that we can succeed within a strong United Kingdom, focused on what is the day job, which is rebuilding after the COVID crisis, not on constitutional carnage that an independence referendum would create and the energy that would take out of any government that is mandated after May the 6th. It's the last thing Wales would require and need of its government to be focused on.
Mark Drakeford, you've held the finance brief before. Can Wales afford to go independent?
For me, it's not a question about whether we can afford it, it's whether we want to be. I don't want Wales not to be part of the United Kingdom. Now, you ask Adam a straightforward, practical question and you get another burst of empty rhetoric. Let me ask him a specific question. What currency will Wales have when we're independent?
As an economist, I would say that the best option would be to use sterling and to use a system of indexed units of account.
Well, any idea that you are independent. If you are using sterling, the idea that you are independent when your monetary policy will be set in the Bank of England and in the Treasury in London, it's just such nonsense.
Mark, study indexed units of account. Robert Schiller, the Nobel Prize winner, Jerry Holtham, an economist that you commissioned, has written extensively about how you can combine the best of both worlds, giving you the degree of flexibility over interest rate policy and exchange rate policy while being part of a sterling currency area. Study the economics. I'm an economist. Maybe I've got an unfair advantage in this.
You're an economist that deals in deficit, Adam.
Jerry Holtham, your own economic advisor, has written an entire paper, Mark, about how you would use sterling as an independent country within a currency area. You're behind the curve on this, Mark, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
Any idea that you can set independent interest rates while using the pound sterling is just cloud cuckoo land.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I hate to turn this into Economist Weekly, so we'll move on slightly if we may. Thank you for your answers on that one. If we can move on now to a question from Alan Baker, please.
Alan Baker, what do you intend to do about the plague of second homes in Wales?
Mark Drakeford, if you could answer this one first, please.
Well, I wouldn't use the language of plague. I don't think that is helpful, and I don't think it's respectful of people who are in that position. I do agree that there are some communities in Wales where the preponderance of second homes has become a cause of concern to people who live locally, and that things need to be done about it. It will need to be a combination of different levers. It's why we've set up a special unit in the Welsh Government to prepare for action in the next term. And amongst the actions that will be needed will be taxation measures to make sure that people do have second homes, they make a proper contribution to those local communities. Planning measures to make sure that local authorities are able to control the number of homes that are newly built in that way. And thirdly, some ways in which we can make sure that homes that come up for sale can be offered in the first instance to people who live locally. Now, if you combine all those things, then I think you can have protection for those local communities without turning the tourism industry and people who come to visit Wales into the sort of target of the type of rhetoric that we heard in the question.
Thank you, Mark Drakeford. For Plaid Cymru, Adam Price, please.
Well, we actually called on the Welsh Labour government to implement many of the policies that Mark Drakeford has just reeled off in the last Senedd. You know, words are great, but we need action. So yes, we would increase the council tax on second homes by 200%. We would treble the land transaction tax. We would introduce the ability to set a cap on the number of second homes in a given area, and require people to have planning permission for the change of use. And crucially, we would build 50,000 genuinely affordable homes to rent and buy, the biggest public house building program that we've had in Wales since the 1970s. So positively, we're also, as well as limiting the problem of second homes, providing those affordable homes for our young people to enable them to stay in the communities.
Adam, thank you very much. Andrew Davies from the Conservatives, please.
Yeah, it's unfortunate use of word plague of second homes. Let's not forget there are more empty properties in Wales than there are second homes in Wales. And that's a key commitment that the Conservatives have about bringing empty properties back into beneficial use to meet the housing shortage demand that we see. It's also a key commitment from the Conservatives to build 100,000 homes over the next 10 years, because we know that the market has been undersupplied. That's created inflation and an inability to purchase houses locally. At the moment, only between 5,000 and 6,000 homes are completed on an annual basis in Wales, when in fact the market needs 10,000 to 12,000 houses every year. And ultimately it's about creating those 65,000 jobs the length and breadth of Wales, so that young people can afford to put their pound down and either get that rented property or that bought property with a mortgage. Because unless you've got quality jobs in communities, especially in rural communities, then people will move away from those communities, and ultimately you'll have people moving into them and taking them as second homes. So on all three counts, I believe what we're proposing is positive action to address empty homes, affordable housing by increasing the supply of housing on the housing market, and making sure we create quality jobs across Wales that pay decent wages to ultimately allow people to afford either a rented property or an owned property by putting a mortgage down.
Thank you very much, Adam. Sorry, Andrew, answer the next question, please.
I better look in.
How dare
My
you?
name is David Morris. I'm an electrician. I live in Barry. I'm just wondering whether you're going to reinvest in the towns, the local shops, as they've been decimated over the last few years. Are you going to reinvest?
Adam, if you can answer this one first, please, for Plaid Cymru.
Yeah, absolutely critical. So we're going to introduce an urban renaissance fund, which will be driving, investment in particularly into those communities that need it most. We've got to be driving jobs, particularly into valleys communities and rural areas, which have suffered the biggest economic problems in many in recent years. We're going to have a program of business rate reductions, which are targeted at town centres. We're going to have town centre managers with a vision of how we can particularly work with independent businesses, the new generation of entrepreneurs, and we can be investing in those new businesses, changing the focus of our government investment away from large companies, the inward investment that has been right at the heart of economic policy for too long and really hasn't solved our problems, and focusing it instead on local homegrown businesses in retail and other sectors, because they are the backbone of the Welsh economy, and they're going to deliver the jobs throughout Wales, quality jobs in every community that we desperately need.
Thank you very much, Adam. Andrew Davies from the Conservatives, please.
Yeah, making sure we reform the business rate scheme so that businesses retain as much cash as possible within their businesses to create those employment opportunities, create business rate free zones in particular so that new businesses in particular can set up on the high street. But it is a fact that the way people shop has changed dramatically, not just over the last 12 months, but before that. And we've got to move with the times and make that more of a 24-hour culture with residential, social opportunities, as well as retail opportunities within our high streets. So working with local authorities to empower them via the planning system or their business development system to be more imaginative with the way they develop the high streets, and creating a tourism towns fund to specifically support tourism towns that have been hit so hard over the last 12 months with the complete loss and demise of most economic activity that they've faced, which normally sustain those high streets and those tourism towns.
Thank you, Andrew. And on to Mark Drakeford, please.
Well, it is very important that we reinvest in our town centres. But what we can't do is to think that we can go back to the way that things used to be. If we want a vibrant future for the centres of our towns, we're going to have to think more imaginatively about it. We will create a network of community banks on high streets throughout Wales. We will create remote working hubs that will allow people to live and work in those communities. We have a target of 30% fewer people working in offices as we come out of the pandemic. We'll need accommodation. We want people to live in town centres as well as to work there, so that these places have life and liveliness after the working day is over. We want to make sure that those anchor activities like pharmacies, we have community pharmacies in 660 locations across Wales. We will support them to stay on the high street. And then there will be a future for retail, but it won't be the sort of retail that we've seen in the past. It'll be newly invented, it'll be imaginative and creative, and by drawing all those strands together and putting the power of government and government investment behind them, there really is a vibrant, vital and successful future for our town centres.
Thank you all. We'll move on to Eve's question, please.
Hi, I'm Eve. I'm a student at Cardiff University. My question would be, what are your plans for tuition fees for now and in the future? We've paid £9 for an experience we haven't got with online learning and an education from our bedrooms.
Thank you very much. Andrew Davies first, please.
We're committed in our manifesto to making sure that there's a reimbursement fund working with the universities for those students who haven't had the experience that they should have had over the last 12 months, because many students, I include my young daughter in this as well, started in university in September, looked at the experience and either took a year out or persevered with it. And ultimately, many haven't had that experience they've paid £9,000 plus for. So there is a need for a rebate to be put on the table so students can have that money back. Secondly, when it comes to STEM projects and STEM lessons and tuition fees, we would reimburse 50% of STEM subject fees back to students, because we know we need them students staying within Wales, within the economy, to create the dynamic economy that we're so keen to develop here, that lifts take-home pay. We know for a fact that in Wales, a Welsh worker at the moment takes home between £50 and £55 a week less within the Welsh economy as opposed to other parts of the United Kingdom. Unless we keep those graduates within the Welsh economy, then we won't develop that economy for the 21st century. So we're listening, we're prepared to act, and we will act in unison with the higher education sector to deliver rebates back to students who haven't had that experience they've paid up for.
Well, shall I go next? Look, first of all, we should just recognise that this has been a really tough time for our young people in our universities and in our schools and colleges. That's why we have provided tens of millions of pounds in additional help for the sector, working not just with the universities themselves, but with the National Union of Students as well, to make sure that our young people have had the support that they need or their mental health and well-being needs, as well as trying to make the very best we can of the very challenging circumstances that we have faced. We have the most generous system of student support anywhere in the United Kingdom, for part-time as well as full-time students, for postgraduate as well as undergraduate students. Just before the Senedd ended, we announced our new Erasmus Plus scheme for Wales, a £65 million investment to make sure our young people go on having the ability to visit other parts of the world, to study, to work, to volunteer, and to welcome people from the rest of the world here to Wales. Our university sector is a very, very important part of our future here in Wales, and a Welsh Labour government will go on investing in it to make sure that it delivers for those young people who are there now, and to make sure that the jobs and futures are there for them.
Thank you very much. Sorry for my technical problems. Adam, on to you, please.
Yeah, we think as a point of principle that university education should be free, as it was, when I went to university. And as a first step towards that, we will cut the maximum tuition fee in Wales for Welsh students to £7,500. And we will also ensure that we make up the shortfall in funding to universities through increasing the teaching grant. And we will invest over 100 million annually extra in R&D funding into Welsh universities in line with the Brown Review. We want to attract more and more of Welsh students to study at Welsh universities, not to leave Wales, because there's a tendency, of course, if you leave Wales to study, fewer of those students will come back. So we want to make Welsh universities well-funded universities, and as well as the tuition fee cut, hopefully maintain a higher proportion of Welsh students opting to study in Wales.
Thank you all. Andrew, you said there that your party would offer a rebate to students affected by problems this year. Mark Drakeford, Adam Price, where do your party stand on that?
Well, we want to introduce the cut in tuition fees immediately, but it's not just a temporary thing for us. It would be permanent, and in fact, it would be the first step in getting rid of tuition fees overall.
Mark Drakeford?
The only legal powers to reduce tuition fees lie with the universities. Government can't do it. The contract is between the student and the university. We have provided funds to universities to allow them to do that in negotiation with their student body, but they have to do it. The government simply does not have the legal capacity or authority. The contract is not with us. It's with the institution at which the student is studying.
Andrew Davies, do you wish to come back on that?
That's why I made the point in my opening remarks, is working with the higher education sector, because we have to remember all universities are autonomous bodies, but it is, if you buy a service, you expect that service to be delivered, and through no fault of the university, because of the COVID crisis, they haven't been able to deliver their side of the deal, and students are left with a big bill around their necks. And it is incumbent on government, who do fund certain activities within universities, to work with the sector to seek that reimbursement. We would seek to create the facilities to allow that to happen by reimbursing the higher education authorities, the universities namely, to provide that reimbursement where it is proven that the services that have been provided to students have fallen short. But this isn't a criticism of the universities, because they found themselves in a very difficult position. But it cannot be right if you put 9,000 down and expected a course to be delivered. Because of the COVID restrictions, much of what you were expecting to buy into hasn't been able to be delivered.
Okay, thank you all very much. And on to our final question of the night, which is from Michael Murphy.
If you could do just one thing to make Wales a better place to live in, what would it be?
Mark Drakeford, can we ask you first, please?
If it was just one thing, it would be to make sure that the huge natural resources that we have here in Wales are put to work to create the energy of the future. If we know one thing about the future of the globe, it is that we are going to run out of oil and other fossil fuels. The whole world will need energy from the sea, energy from water, energy from wind. We have all of those things here in Wales. If I could do just one thing, it would be to make Wales the renewable energy capital of the world.
Mark Drakeford from Welsh Labour, thank you very much. Plaid Cymru's Adam Price, please.
If it was just one thing, then for me it would be to end child hunger. I was one of those children in the 1980s that had free school meals, and you know, for me, quite as well as it being the moral thing to do, we all gain. You know, when we pull a child out of child hunger and child poverty, we all gain as a society. You know, that child is then able to realize their potential and contribute to our economy. What is the number one determinant of our success as a nation? It is the skills, the talent, and knowledge of our people. And you know, our children can't learn if they're hungry. So if extending free school meals, universal free school meals, is the Finnish have the best education system in Europe, and they say universal free school meals is absolutely essential to that. So that'll be my one thing: ending child hunger in Wales.
Adam Price, thank you very much. And Welsh Conservatives, Andrew R.T. Davies.
To give everyone the opportunity to succeed in life, basically. I'm someone who's got dyslexia. I know what it's like to be to feel like being left on the sidelines because you can't do something. And I believe government can be put to good work to make sure that that isn't the effect and the feel that people have, whether they're young, middle-aged or old, whether that be in their economic prospects, their social prospects or their community prospects. And I believe that's where government could be a force for good, is unlocking that potential so that irrespective of what you think you can bring to the table, that can be put to good use and unlock the potential that we all have within us, and no one feels left behind, because that is a terrible, terrible feeling for anyone to feel, and that's where government can be such a force for good.
There we go. Thank you very much to all three leaders tonight. So just to recap, we've had Andrew R.T. Davies from the Welsh Conservatives, Mark Drakeford, the current First Minister from Welsh Labour, and Plaid Cymru's Adam Price. All that's left to say is good luck to all three of you ahead of Thursday's election, and we really hope that tonight has given you a little bit of a better idea of who to vote for. Best of luck to all of you. Thank you very much, Jacob Bowd.
Thank you.